Now once you get that far, you usually have to thread a bolt in here. Hopefully that's the right size. Sometimes it even helps if you get 2 bolts. And then, so you line up that last set of cam bearings. Push the rest of the way in. Alright, there we go. Cam's all the way in. Alright, there we go. Bolts are Loctited in. Retaining plate tabs are pushed over on there. Good to go. Alright, back to working on the 1980 Trans Am. So I put the timing gear on. Now the pin wants to be at the 3 o'clock position, but when you try to rotate that up, it don't line up. So the best thing to do is to put the pin down at the bottom, try to line everything up, and then put the cam gear on the pin, and then kind of rotate the cam up until it's in the right spot, and then see where your dots are, mark to mark. And here's how it should be lined up, dot to dot. My red line's a little crooked there, but you get the idea. Which mine ain't mark to mark no more. I turned the motor over a little bit, but they were. I was trying to get this bolt out. I got it stuck. Trying to get the bolt out to see, because it makes it easier to get the timing cover without that washer on. But when you stab the cam, you got them big journals. Those big journals have to go through the cam bearings. So you got to kind of push it in, you push it past the first one, and then you hit the next one, then you kind of line it up, and then you push it through. It shouldn't take force. You just got to wiggle it around and line it up. And once you get towards the end, you got to put some bolts in here to give you some more leverage to wiggle it around to get it in that very back cam bearing. But yeah, it shouldn't take any force. It should just slide right in if you've got the cam bearings lined up on the cam journals. And then once you got your timing gear on and lined up, again, like I said, put the pin down here, put the cam on the pin, rotate everything up, line it up. If you're off, rinse and repeat until you get it lined up. You'll have this dot right here pointing straight down, and then you'll have a dot right there, which my dot's over here now, or no, it's over here now, yeah. I turned the motor over backwards a little trying to get that out. But once you get it lined up dot to dot, get your cam gear on, put your cam button in. It goes right into the hole inside the cam gear. And then you put your retaining plate on that holds that in place. Then you put your bolts in. But now you got to check your end play. Hopefully, I'm just going to put and you have to take the timing cover off and on to check the end play when the motor's in the car like this. But you should barely have any movement at all. It's hard to get anything in there to measure the movement, but I mean, it should move, but I mean, it should barely move, so much so that you can't even hardly see the movement. But what I usually do is stick a screwdriver down in the very back where the distributor goes in, and I just use a screwdriver and pry back and forth and make sure it moves, but I mean, just barely moves, but it should have just slight movement. And this is the time, they make better timing covers for this, but this is just a cheap one, and it does have this reinforcement here, and you can see where the button was rubbing, but I can't catch that with my finger now. It's just rubbed the paint or whatever they've got on there off. But yeah, and this right here, you can take these off and replace those, or you know, if you don't have enough, you can put a thicker one in there. If you got too much, you can put a thinner one in there, or you can just shave this one down until you get your end play on your cam just right. Like I said, it should move, but I mean, it should barely move, so much so that you can barely see it with the eye. But like I said, it's hard to get anything in there to measure that. But if you stick a screwdriver in there, it moves a whole bunch. you got problems. You got to take the timing cover off, try different thicknesses. Some people, what they'll do is they'll put like putty right here, and it'll squish the putty, and that'll give you an idea of how thick, you know, it needs to be. But yeah. So now I'm gonna put the timing cover on. I done cleaned everything off. I just took a little scraper right there. Make sure it don't drop down inside there. Now he's got the one piece oil pan gasket. Some of these come in, there's a separate piece that goes down at the bottom, and then you got the oil pan gasket. This one's all one rubber piece. And to get this on over this lip and put that on at the same time, you got to drop the pan down some. What I'm going to try to do is put a screwdriver here and put a screwdriver there and try to wedge it down a little bit, because I did take the first 3 bolts out, but I don't think that's going to be enough. I'm probably going to have to wind up taking more bolts out and seeing if I could get that to pry down a little bit more. You got to be careful when you stick a screwdriver in there not to ruin the gasket, because if you do that, then you're going to be replacing the whole pan, or just putting a whole bunch of RTV there, which I've done. I ain't ashamed to admit it. But look at all that condensation that built up here. It's been raining. I had it all covered up with that, and I had the hood on it, and then I had the car cover on it, which the cat messed the car cover up. The cat likes to get on the car cover and claw at it, but yeah, I'm gonna take that crank bolt out. Screwdriver there, and see how much room that gives me to put that timing cover on. If it don't, I'm gonna have to get under the car and take some more bolts out of the pan. Alright, I wound up loosening every single pan bolt, and then I took the front 3 out, and that's got me well, should be enough room. There's about I don't know, at least 1/8 of an inch there, probably even more. But that gasket, it bows up on the top, so it's just bowing up there. There's quite a bit of room there, so I'm gonna go ahead and get some silicone on the timing cover gasket and try to put that on there. Here's how the gasket usually comes. But his is a one piece that goes all the way around the pan, which those are better. And there's the gasket. So I'm gonna put a RTV, coat of RTV right through here. I'm gonna put the gasket on, push it into it, let it dry just a little bit, and then I'm gonna put a coat on top of the gasket after I put that on. And then we'll put this in. And then when we put this in, we're gonna make sure that rubber seal gets up in here. And then there's a lip on the bottom of the rubber seal that has the lip on the oil pan. So gotta make sure that all goes on right. Now also, I'm gonna concentrate some more TV in these corner areas as well. Both sides in these corners. 'Cause that's usually where it's gonna leak. All right, I got all that RTV'd on there. It's good and stuck. I pushed it down, let it dry. And then I think I'm just going to put the rest on the block. That way it's easier to put this on without getting it all over my hands. But it started pouring rain on me out there. Had to cover everything up real quick. But it's stopped now, so we'll try again. Get a little wet. Don't matter. Also, you can change the seal right here. You just knock it out this way from the inside out, and it'll pop out. Then you just pop the other one back in. But this motor don't have many miles on it, so we're gonna leave that one in there. Look at all the mud and stuff. I was working on it over there, but I had to get under there to do all the oil pan bolts, so I moved it over here. But had to cover everything back up real quick because it rained real hard. But I'm gonna go under there and see if this will slide on. All right, there we go. It went on. Took a little bit of wiggling and a little bit of prying, but that's how that should look. Should be in the groove on here, and then in the groove on the oil pan at the bottom. But it's on there, so now we can just get the bolts, tighten the timing cover up, and then we can tighten the oil pan back up, and that part's done. This is the part I was dreading the most, especially with it raining outside. But yeah, let's get them timing cover bolts in there, tighten those up. Not to forget our pointer over here for our harmonic balancer and timing. And then we'll lower the car back down after we get that tightened up. And get the oil pan tightened up. Timing cover gets tightened up first though. Alright. Oil pan's all tight. Timing cover's tightened up, and what I'll do is I'm gonna try to squeeze some more TV in this corner right here. Can't see it good from this angle, but right there where the gasket hits the timing cover, there's like a three-way thing going on there, and that's where I put that extra RTV at too. But I'm gonna squeeze some in down inside there too, best I can on each side. And then I'm gonna take the cam in play. The cam in play ain't right, and I have to do this all over again. I'm sure it should be good. It was before, and nothing's changed. The cam should be the exact same size. Woo, it's a cold one today. I think I'd have rather worked in the rain like I did yesterday. It was like 66 and rainy yesterday. And then today, it's like 38. Cold, I don't like the cold. Alright, so I took that blanket out. I pried on the cam back and forth. I didn't see it move. It's supposed to move a little. But I mean, I forget exactly what it is. It's something, it's like 2,000ths or something like that. And don't quote me on that. It's just guessing off the top of my head. But it's barely supposed to move. But, well, like I said, I mean, this is already, the cam button and all that's already been done before. And actually, the best way to set these is with the motor out of the car, and you can set them with the rear cam bearing, or cam bearing, the rear freeze plug that goes over the back of the cam. That's really the best way to set them, but you don't really want those cams to move around at all. But we're gonna roll with that. I'm just gonna go ahead and put the harmonic balancer on. Like I said, it's already, Chris already had it set up, and it was set up pretty good. So the cam's the exact same size, so nothing should have changed. All right, so I'm gonna put the balancer on. There's a keyway right there. There's a keyway right there. Make absolutely sure that those two line up. And I'm gonna put some Vaseline in here and in here to just help it go on better. All right, on this little tool I'm using, make sure you got the right fitting that fits in your crank. And then this time we're gonna push this big round piece. So it needs to go on the front of the big nut. But this time we're gonna have the flat side towards the balancer. So you gotta screw it all in together, is you gotta sandwich the big round piece in between that big bolt and the balancer. So go ahead and put that on. Now I just push that thing on, it starts to get hard. And I realized the bottom part of my jack will come off, and I can use it as a breaker bar. And that big 3/4 inch socket, it fits about on there, enough to hold it anyway. So I'm gonna take the crescent wrench and the other breaker bar and turn it until I can't turn it. I'm gonna turn it by hand first, with just that crescent wrench. And then when I can't turn it no more, I'll put that breaker bar on it. You'll know when it bottoms out. You'll feel it. But I wished I'd have measured from the timing cover to the to the harmonic balancer just so I know. When you take them off, it's a good idea to take that measurement just so you know if you're all the way on or not. But I do know that this balancer goes almost all the way up to the tips of those timing marks. I do know that. But yeah, I'll finish putting that on. There we go. That's on. Now we just loosen that bolt, and then we can unscrew this one, which I already done. Now I'll just unscrew that out. Take it out, and then we'll put the pulley on, the crank bolt, and then the 3 pulley bolts. So one bad thing about this tool, sometimes this piece comes unscrewed from here and then stays up inside there. Now, if that was an actual bolt head and I could put a depot in there, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it's not, see? And I tell you what, I had that so tied up in there, I couldn't get it out. I tried. I had it real tied up in there. But it still come loose. So now I'm going to have to try to figure out a way to get a wrench in there and get that out. Well, that wound up being easy. I just screwed this piece in there, tightened it up pretty good, hammered on the front of this just a little bit, and unscrewed it, and it come out. Good deal. That could have been a lot worse, but yeah, wound up being easy. All right, I just got the 3 bolts and the pulley tight. I'm just eyeballing it here, make sure this is straight. And it's as straight as can be, so that means the pulley's on all the way. Now, if this ain't lining up, then your pulley ain't in far enough, or your harmonic balancer ain't in far enough. So I'll go ahead and tighten them 3 bolts and then put the crank bolt in last. Alright, so took the alternator off just so I could get to the fuel pump better. Now, a little trick when you're doing these, a lot of people have a hard time with that push rod falling out and not being able to get the pump in because it keeps falling out. And you got to get that pump in there with that lever on it underneath of, there's the lever, underneath that rod. So there's a little hole right there. Now what you do is you shove the push rod up in there, turn the motor over to the point where the push rod goes up the highest, off the lobe that runs the mechanical fuel pump on the cam. So it goes up as high as it can. You push that rod up in there, and then you tighten that and get a longer bolt. I took a short bolt out of there, which is what goes in there. A short bolt, that's what came out. And that short bolt's just to keep that from leaking oil. That's all it's for. It will leak oil there. But I took one of these fuel pump bolts out and I put in there. Now I'm going to push that push rod up in there. I'm going to turn it over until the push rod's up as high as it can be. And then I'm going to tighten that bolt up against the push rod. Now I'm not going to tighten it. I'm just going to lightly tighten it with my fingers enough just to hold the push rod in there, because you don't want to score the side of the push rod. Also on these push rods, make sure you got the right top for your cam. So we run a bronze tip on these cams. And it still looks good. It doesn't look wore or anything. So bronze tip. Alright, so I'm going to stick that in there. Once I get that in there, as high as it'll go, turning the motor over, I'm going to just lightly tighten that bolt up against it. And that's going to hold it in there. So just for reference, that's how long that bolt is. And that's how long it had to go in there to hit it. And I felt it hit it, and I just finger tightened it. And turn the light on. It'll probably go up in there farther than that if I turn the motor over more. I'm not sure. But I know that's enough for me to get that fuel pump in there. So I'm not going to worry about them. That's plenty of clearance. Now, I've already cleaned off my area for my fuel pump plate. Already cleaned the fuel pump plate off. Now I'm going to put a gasket and RTV on that. Put that on, tighten up the 2 bottom bolts, and then I'm going to put the gasket on the fuel pump. Clean the fuel pump area up too. Put the gasket and RTV on it, and then I'll put it in, and then I'll start at least this bolt. Once I get this bolt started and snug, I'll take that bolt out of there and put it in there. So that's how you do that. There we go. Fuel pump's back on. So again, to recap, I put the fuel pump plate. I put silicone on both sides of the gasket. I put that on. I started the 2 bottom bolts. There's 2 bottom bolts in there. I just hand tightened them. And then again, you clean all your, you gotta clean the old material off. Make sure it's nice and clean. Then I cleaned off the fuel pump. Put silicone on both sides of the gasket. And then I stuck that on there, and I got 1 bolt started. Once I got the 1 bolt started, I took the long bolt I had holding the push rod in right there, and then I put that one in over here, and then I tightened both of those up, and then I tightened the bottom up with a wrench, and then I put my short screw back in right there, my short screw, and I put silicone on it so it don't leak oil. And that's it. That's on. Now, I think I might move on to the water pump, just to put the water pump on, then put the alternator on. That way the front of the motor will be done. And then we can play with push rods and rocker arms and valve covers. Putting the water pump on. Again, a light coat of sealant on the bottom and top of the gasket. And also on these, those water will come out of the holes on those, so I'll put some sealant on the threads of the bolts too. And I find it easier to smear that on these, but put it on your finger than just smear it with your finger. Works best for me. But water pumps going on next. These bolts will get a lot of crap in them where people put sealant on them like they're supposed to so they don't leak. But I take a wire brush and clean all that off, and then I put new stuff on there. Dog's wanting to play fetch more. Alright, I got my gaskets on. I made sure the bolt holes were lined up. I put the top 2 bolts in. The gasket holds the bolts. And put a little Permatex on the tip of the bolts there. When I screw it in, it'll put it in the threads. So I'm going to stab that in there now. Alright, I got the alternator on. All these bolts are all loose still. I'm gonna have my girlfriend come out and push down on that bar. So I got the bar underneath the alternator and up against the water pump, and then she'll just pull right here, and then I'll tighten up the alternator bolt right here, making sure it's nice and straight in the bracket. And then I'll tighten the rest of the bolts up, and the alternator will be done. And then we can do push rods and rockers. The girlfriend pushed down on that and I tightened up that bolt. And once I got that tight, I went ahead and tightened this one and this one. These 2 were already tight. These I just left loose. And this piece was spread out. So I tried to squeeze it in and I broke it right there, so I had to re-weld it. That should hold. Don't judge my welding. Alright. That's all done. Belt's a little bit tighter than it should be, but we like to run it tight because if we don't, it likes to fling itself off. We should actually be running an electric water pump and then a low mount alternator, which would fit pretty good over here, I think. The shorter the belt is, the less chances it'll fling off. So That's what we should be doing. We'll probably go to that one day. But yeah, I'm gonna put the take the blankets out of here and check the rollers on the lifters, make sure everything's good, drop those in the bores, and then drop the push rods in and the rocker arms on. I checked all the lifters out. I put them back in the holes. I put the push rods in. Make sure when you put the push rods in that they go down into the little divots on the lifters. I checked the rollers on the lifters. Did I say rocker arms? I get my words mixed up a lot. But anyway, I checked the rollers on the lifters. I stuck all of them were good. I stuck them back down in the hole. I checked the little C-clip on top of them on the plunger. Make sure all that's good. Put the push rods in. Make sure you put the push rod down into the divot on the lifters there. Also, another thing. Yeah. When you put these rocker arms on, there's a flat side. See, that's the flat side. And then there's a rounded side. Make absolutely sure the flat side is facing you. And when you put them on, make sure the push rod goes up in there, which it should automatically do it by itself. Now, this is a small base circle cam, so we're probably going to need different size push rods. We're probably going to need a little longer push rod, since this one has such a smaller base cam. See, that one's all the way down. There's plenty of clearance there, it looks like, but it's not really the clearance that we're looking at. What I usually do is I'm gonna put all these on just so it'll be easier to turn the motor over, because the spark plugs are still in it. I'm gonna put all these on and set them, and I'm gonna come back to these two, and I'm gonna put a black marker right here, black marker here, and then I'll turn the motor over with the starter so it turns over quick. And I'll check my wear mark and go from there. But it's definitely going to need longer push rods. 100% sure on that. So, but I'm gonna go ahead and put all those on and put the rockers and the poly locks on. The poly locks, I'll unscrew that center Allen out a little bit before I put them on, just so they don't bottom out. But go ahead and put all these on again, flat side facing up, and I'll do that on all of them. So poly locks, you can usually set by hand. You can usually feel when it hits, but now sometimes you'll get one with a lifter with a soft plunger. So make sure that when it hits, you look in there and make sure it's not pushing the plunger off the retainer ring. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to rough set these because we're going to have to check the push rod length. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the motor over a quarter of a turn at a time, about 8 times, and every quarter of a turn I'll go through here and check my finger tightness on all of them. And then once that's done, I'll tighten up the poly lock on all of them except for those two. And then the battery is dead, so I'm gonna have to charge the battery up. I'm also gonna have to put this in a fuel tank, because when I turn it over, it's gonna shoot fuel out, and we don't want that to get in the motor or anything. But yeah, I'm gonna turn the motor over a quarter of a turn 8 times. Set those with fingers, except for number 1 over there. I'm gonna set those with a little bit of preload, and mark the valve stem, and then crank it over with a starter and see where my see where my mark's at. I'm pretty sure these are going to have to be longer, and we're probably going to have to order one of the push rod tools that check your length, and then once we get the length, then we're going to have to order push rods. But before I crank it over, I got to charge the battery, and I got to put that in a gas tank, and I'm going to unhook the coil so I don't have spark plugs trying to zap me. Yep, so that's where we're at. I'll go through and do all those, and I think I'll call it a day, and then I'll make a separate video on checking the push rod length. But I'm going to go ahead and do this and get the battery on a charger and call it a day. So actually, after thinking about it, the distributor's not going to be in, so there's nothing to turn the oil pump. So I was wanting to turn it over with the starter so it would pump up the lifters and everything like that, but can't put the distributor in until we get the intake back, so I'm going to have to check the push rod length just by turning it over by hand. For sure don't want to be turning it over with the starter with no oil pump turning. And that's going to do it for this video. Y'all have a good day. We'll do a separate video on when I check the push rod length. I got to order a push rod checker.